Yeah, we're just going to have a chat about David Pipper's time kind of working in the music industry. So first off, I think Ian, we were just thinking about asking if you could just talk a little bit, maybe Pippa, about start off with your journey. How did you get to kind of be one of the owners of the Cavern? Where did that idea come from? How did it grow? Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Well, when I started working at the Cavern already existed. Obviously, in a minute, Dave will tell you how that came into being. But I just started working there. It was a place that I always went to for gigs and things like that. And then I just started working there behind the bar. And doing a few shifts and blah, 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 you know. And then got into promoting, because, quite a sneaky way, actually, which I'm not sure if Dave's particularly aware of. But in those days, it was before email, or before the internet at all. So gigs were organised by agents phoning up the landline at the Cavern, and the landline was behind the bar. So I started intercepting phone calls from booking agents who were phoning to speak to Dave and Patrick, and then because also in those days we just had, everything was booked in this big paper diary, you know, a book, and the book was by the phone in case anyone rang and wanted to book a show in. And so I would take the phone call and they would say, oh, is Dave or Patrick there? Patrick, who now runs the Phoenix, but used to run the Cavern in the very, very beginning. And I'd say, oh, no, they're not here at the moment, but is there anything I can help you with? And they'd say, oh, have you got, October the 23rd free for such and such? And I'd say, oh, yes, and just started booking it in myself. Sorry about that. But so that's kind of how I kind of got involved with with the promoting side of it, rather than just going in and doing bar shifts. Around the same kind of time, I started running the bar, because the bar manager before was a complete train wreck, so I, just by default, and being slightly more capable than him, ended up running the bar. So then I was running the venue and booking shows as well, even though I kind of got into it in a slightly sneaky way.
Nice, awesome, and thank you so much for that. And then, Dave, what about you and Pat? How did you guys kind of come to...
Well, I was at art college in Exeter, moved down here to go to art college, and when I graduated, started putting on shows. It was this sort of indie era, but met a couple of sort of peers who, we formed a band, like punk rock band, and we decided we were going to bring some bands from overseas to Exeter. This was probably about 1989. The venues around, but the art centre was there, but it wasn't really kitted out like it is now. And there was also the Lemon Grove was the big place for shows. So we decided we were just going to contact these bands from, for example, Washington DC was one of some of our sort of idols resided there, and run a label called. The band for Guardian was one of the first bands we did actually of that kind.
Is that Sub Pop?
No, Discord Records. Washington DC is a sort of obviously political capital, and they were a very political label. But like people said, in those days, obviously there was no internet or mobile phones, obviously. And to be honest, at that point, we didn't even have a landline or phone. We just used to write letters off the back of one of their records. Could you play in Exeter? And then they'd write back and say, yeah, give us a date, that sort of thing. So we started doing that, but we're finding that it was very difficult to find venues for that kind of band. So, for example, it's really difficult to kind of contextualise it, but bands weren't really playing in Exeter at all at that point, so people didn't even know what they were. And when I say people, I mean people who own pubs. So you'd book a pub out and you'd say, right, we've got this band, they're called whatever, and they'd turn up and there'd be some punk rock band from the US trying to pull the plug on it too loud, can't have this. And so we figured we needed our own venue. At the time, like I said, we were in bands, so we'd played around the country in Europe, and they had really cool venues there. So we thought we'd try and model what we did on that, and hence there was a bit of an economic collapse like we're going to get now. A load of places in Exeter became available as spaces. For example, Timepiece, Cavern, all these places had all closed. It wasn't the Cavern when I bought it. It was just a random bar. So we, took a short lease on that and started putting on shows on a regular basis. And it was also a platform for us to play as well and make contacts with bands from around, like I said, Europe and America and stuff like that. So we could potentially get shows overseas. So that's how we actually took the lease out for that.
Can I just ask you to fill in the gaps there, because you said you moved to Exeter as an art student and then you started putting on shows. Can you explain that process? Because for people in the room, it might be like, well, how do you just put on a show?
Well, actually,
so
you'd have to go back much further in time till I was 13. When I was at school, our chemistry teacher run a venue I lived in a place called Aylesbury near London, and it was a venue called Friars, and they were putting on really cool punk bands, and he would encourage us for if we had like a sixth form disco or something like this, or just book proper bands. And so the first band I booked was a band called the Piranhas. I mean, with a group of us, but so he kind of inspired me into that world, and then I was obviously interested in that kind of music. So any chances I got, if I'd seen a band, oh, do you want to come and play in Exeter? And we'd find a place for them.
So it's kind of as simple as sourcing bands and finding a venue. And what about, how did you promote then? How did you sell tickets?
Well, in those days, it was advance tickets were sold through record shops. So there was H&B Solo Records, a few, which was in the Guildhall. They would be our vehicle of selling records and walk-ups on the door. You've got to remember that there were no other shows at all in the vicinity, so, that kind of niche audience, it was the only place to go anyway, so it made it easy.
Can I just add to that that's completely true, because when I was your age, the Cavern didn't exist. There were bigger shows at Lemon Grove, but there wasn't any kind of good small venue, and also at that point, so people were desperate to go to any gigs that Dave and his friend Eddie were putting on. You'd just go to. It didn't even matter what it was. You just go, because there was maybe one or two a month, and that was the only time you'd see a good band. But the other thing that's crucial about that point was that, again, sorry we sound like granddad and grandma here, but it was before the internet, so you didn't know what a band sounded like unless you went to the gig. So if you saw a poster saying, I remember one show we went to, this worst band name ever, Poke It With a Stick. And I saw a poster for Poke It With a Stick, and you think, what's this? But, the only way to find that out is to go to the gig. Now, it might be terrible and you wish you hadn't gone, or it might be brilliant, but either way, you weren't going to know that until you got there. And obviously, you didn't want to be the only person who didn't realise that there was this new band, But nowadays, people check out the bands before the show, don't they? And I expect you all do, and you might look it up and go no, I'm not going to that, because, they're rubbish or whatever. But in those days, you didn't know, so you had to go to every single thing. So a really good scene kind of sprung up when Dave and Ed were putting on those shows at the Arts Centre and stuff, because of everybody having to go to every show.
I would say one of the key reasons that even I got into sort of independent music, for example, and definitely in Exeter putting on shows, was for some reason I figured you have to terraform your own environment. Just being a consumer, you're just going to get what you're given. We didn't want to do that. We wanted what we wanted, and it was very partisan. We were not interested in anybody else or what anyone else was doing. We wanted to create a world, and like I said, we based it on playing in venues in places like Holland and Belgium, which were kind of state-sponsored, so they were done really well, and we figured, we'll just copy everything they do. And there were some great venues in other parts of the UK, like for example, there was a fantastic venue called TJ's in Newport. The guy knew what he was doing, and the bands were fantastic. It opened in the middle of the miners' strike in '86, and all the bands they had were things like Green Day and Offspring playing on the same bill, in a venue the size of the Cavern, maybe a little bit bigger, but that guy knew what he was doing. So we figured if we're going to do it, we want Exeter to be as good as that at least.
Sorry, so can I just link, just to explain the demographic of the people we've got in the room here. So there was a lot of students who are performers who are in bands, but we also have production students who, I shouldn't stereotype, have got into kind of different genres of music, so maybe more electronic dance music, whether that's drum and bass, or house, hip-hop. So I guess the Cavern is predominantly bands. Have you got any advice, maybe, because I was talking to some of the Year 2 students this morning about the fact that they go to Bristol, so again, I shouldn't speak for some of the guys, I'd like you to get involved with this. They have to go to Bristol for for what they want to hear, the music they want to listen to. So if they were to maybe try and start something, and sort of trying to explain that at some point Bristol was probably dead in those areas of music. So what advice could you give to people maybe wanting to start something off in Exeter that doesn't exist at the moment? So i.e., if the rock venue, if you've got rock, so I shouldn't just... Any advice for people maybe trying to start something up in, like, whether it's hip-hop or... I mean, I know that there are drum and bass nights in Bristol, but in Exeter. Any advice, or...?
I mean, it's perfectly simple, really. If you want to put a band on, or a DJ, or an act, or whatever, you contact them and say, do you want to come and play?
But
and they say yes or no. Well, nowadays it's easier than ever. You just go online. Say you wanted to book Idols. That might be quite a lot for your first show, but say you wanted to. You Google Idols booking agent. You find the name of the booking agent and their email address, and you email them. Now, they might say no, obviously, but that's how you book a band. Now, it's easier for me and Dave, because obviously the Cavern's established, so booking agents contact us. But it's quite simple how you book bands and acts, is you contact them and ask them if they want to play. Now, that's the easy bit. After that, it gets harder, because then they say, yes, we will play, how much are you going to pay us? What's the percentage going to be? We need this on the rider, can you book us a hotel? We need backline organising, who's supporting, where's the artwork, and all that kind of stuff. But the actual booking bit is the easy bit. In fact, that's where some promoters come undone. They do the easy bit and book something, and then they're like, I don't know how to do this, But there's no, dark art to it at all. Like Dave was saying, they would write a letter to Washington, DC, and say, do you want to come and play? And they get a letter back saying, yeah, okay. And then you just organise it. Right, aren't I? But people dress it up as much more complicated than it is, Well, another good starting point, if you want to get into promoting, is to just book your own band. So you just get in touch with the venue and say, we want to put a show on, it's our band and our friends' bands, here's the poster, we want to charge £5 or whatever, and just book your own band, because what could be easier than that?
But regarding, for example, drum and bass, hip-hop, and general sort of genres of electronic dance music, in the sort of late 90s, we were the first people to bring drum and bass to Exeter. There was nobody. Obviously that's kind of when it formulated. So the people are still around now. But people like Di, Sav, all those kind of people, and hip hop artists like Africa Bambaataa. The thing is, that's not my area of interest or what I'm good at. So we would always work with outside mates who were interested in that, and they'd say, for example, our drum and bass night was called Hard Edge, and the promoter Steve was absolutely obsessive about drum and bass, and he was friends with local DJs, but he just wanted to step it up and bring these names down. So he, like Peter said, he contacted them through whatever channel he had at the time, which I presume, it was still pre-using emails, I think. Just didn't have a computer. You figured iPhones were only around in 2010 or something for popular use, weren't they? I was thinking about when we used to tour in 2000, there was no sat-navs or mobiles. They existed, but not everyone had them, so they weren't as useful. But so I would say the principle's the same. If you were interested in doing say for example, drum and bass isn't that popular at the moment, is it, in Exeter?
Well,
is it? Or it might be coming back, but it kind of dipped out and moved into dubstep, and dubstep became massive.
Toby, is drum and bass popular at the moment? Oh, okay, in Exeter, but generally it is popular. And I think this is the point. I think that there is an opportunity to sell tickets for drum and bass events, for example, amongst other things.
Yeah.
So, how could they go about that?
Say that's potentially you've identified that if you want to go and see a proper drum and bass show, it'd be in Bristol or somewhere like this, yeah? Well, that was the same back in the late 90s. The only way to get around that is, like I said, create your own environment and decide, I'm a DJ and I want to be supporting somebody that's significant, maybe make contacts, maybe get shows elsewhere, DJing. But maybe there are venues in Exeter that are more geared up for that at the moment, because Ian asked earlier on about kind of whether you need more venues. I think it's such a small town that it needs to be specialised. And there are venues that are much more geared up and understand dance music than us, because that's their area of interest. And I think it'd be kind of stupid of me to... I could easily go and book those acts, but what do I know about it? Who am I? You know, I wouldn't be attracting my peers because I'm too old for that thing. It needs to be somebody who's in on it, who know what you know, how it's going to work and how to market it to those people. So that's what I would say about different genres. I mean, there's all sorts of genres. We know indie, punk rock, metal, and kind of other sort of bandish stuff, but I would say that it's punk rock and indie, which is our thing we do know inside out. Metal we pass off to people who might be quite young, but they know what they want to do with it. Does that make sense? That it's not all, it's a kind of collaboration, you know, it's not like us who do everything, it's the audience does most of it, don't they?
So the collaboration for you, is that with promoters then? So can you just explain that, maybe what the promoter does and what your relationship is with them?
Sorry. Okay, so there's certain shows at the Cavern which me and or Dave will book, but then there's other shows that happen where somebody might get in touch and say, have you got this date free, I want to put this event on. And then quite a lot of the staff who work behind the bar that organise their own kind of things as well. You know, one girl noticed there wasn't any, she's really into goth stuff, so she wants to organise a goth night. We're like, yeah, okay, you know. So then what they do is that they pay the venue a hire fee, and the hire fee, when you pay that to a venue, should cover the use of the room, sound engineer. I mean, all venues will be slightly different, but this is like a general rule. Sound engineer, and any lighting, use of the PA and all that kind of thing, the security, and almost always someone to take the money on the door. So the promoter will pay us that money to use the building, and then it's their job to get the people to come. And then if they do a good job, they'll take any money after they've paid the hire fee and any band money that they've promised to pay to the bands, they can then keep. Anything like the rider and things like that, they would have to buy and organise all of that side of things. So a few nights a week, like I reckon probably half of the week is run by outside promoters who are hiring the place for an event that they want to do, and about half the week is us. Would you say that? But it's kind of good for us because, like Dave says, like we haven't got a handle on every single. I mean, we've got a bit of a handle on every genre, but we don't like every genre, to be honest with you, and don't know the people who do like it. So there's certain areas that we just leave alone. But if somebody else wants to do it, then great, you know. So, like metal, neither of us are particularly mad on that. But then there's this lad who works at the Cavern who is, so, you know, he can organise it.
I'll just pick up one thing there. It's interesting that actually if you're working at a venue, like Pippa, you said you work behind the bar, and then you, if I can use the word hustle, you'll hustle your way in. Actually, it's you don't have to just go straight into running an event, or actually try and get jobs in music-related industries, and then you meet people and you get connected.
Honestly, I can't emphasise enough how much, if you're interested in working in live music, you should be. By the way, I'm not saying this to try and drum up trade at all. I'm just saying from experience of all the people that we employ and have employed for 30 years, if you're remotely interested in getting involved with the live aspect of music industry, be in your local venue all the time. Go to everything all the time. I did a little thing like this on Zoom during lockdown for these kids doing a course in Bristol, and I was on a panel, and someone else on the panel was saying, in order to approach a venue, if you're in a local band, you need a EPK, you need a good recording of this, No, you don't need any of that, because your local venue should already recognise you and know who you are. If you're in a band, you should be watching as many bands as you can all the time to learn not just what to do, but what not to do as well. And if you're just hovering around the venue the whole time, people like me and Dave and other promoters and sound engineers and other bands will get to know you. Then you will start forming relationships with other bands and become part of the scene. Then you'll end up working, and you might end up doing the sound engineering, or you might end up doing lighting, or you might end up doing, DJing or whatever it is. But if you're not there in the first place, that's never going to happen. There's no way in other than that.
For example, one of Ian's students a couple of years ago, who was doing very well on a course here, but socially, you know, he was struggling a bit. I think he might have even been kind of homeless, but his support worker, you know, said that, you know, especially he was interested in the music scene, and in what aspect he didn't know, and he's a very shy guy at the time, and it was one of those things where he kind of turned up, you know, and what do you want to do, and he didn't really know, so you know, I just showed him quickly how to use the lighting rig, and then almost immediately, mate, can you just do this band like now? You know, it's that sort of thing. You know, you get it's how it works. If you want to work in any industry, it's like selling anything. The other person has to need it, and you just put yourself in a position where they need you, and you'd be the first person that you think, oh God, we need somebody to fiddle with a lighting desk tonight. I'll just phone him, see if he can do it. It's as mundane as that, really. He didn't have any actual training in it. I just showed him how to use it. I didn't really know how to use it. Well, to be honest, I said, can you look it up on YouTube?
Yeah, so that's what I remember the story as. We can use his name, Tyrone. I remember him saying that you've got a new lighting desk, I think, and you pretty much said, can you just learn how to use this because you've got a gig tonight? And yeah, exactly, sorry. So he just got on his phone and learned how to use it. And he was coming into college after doing lighting for bands that he used to watch around, and he used to love the bands, and he had a book with with everything that he was doing, their playlists, he had their signatures, and he used to be doing lighting for bands he loved, and he's still working.
He's done some big acts.
Yeah.
He was doing big acts immediately.
Yeah, so
they didn't know, did they? It's just some guy with sat behind a desk,
yeah.
And they, you know, so they
put yourself in the position, basically. Put yourself in a position to be wanted to you know, to kind of do a job.
I mean, that leads on to another thing. You can't actually really do anything wrong, because the pressure of something going wrong is what would make you understand how to do it in the first place. This always works for sound engineers, for example. They have to have a show where everything goes wrong, and after that, they can handle anything, but you can't just learn. I mean, there's that saying, like, the map isn't the territory. You can understand the map, but once you're there, it feels completely different. And I think there are so many nuances of doing any job that are nothing to do with you. You know, it might be like, hang on, where do they keep the microphones? You know, every place will be different. You can't learn where people keep it. You just need to know in that specific circumstance where things are. And so there's nothing that you can actually do wrong at all, apart from really stupidity. But everyone understands, you know, that if you started doing something, you know, with our new engineers, for example, we would often have another engineer sitting in with them just to make them feel comfortable that if it did, like, that it's stopped working, the guy can help them, but it rarely happens. But I think that goes for bands as well. You know, you just need to, or DJs, you know, you just need to do it, see how it goes, and the best way to improve is to see people that are better than you doing the same thing. You know, so that's one of the reasons why we started promoting in the first place, because there's no point just living in a bubble. You need to see people who are really good and think, well, I'm going to model myself on that approach. It's sort of tacit information that you'd never really know it just by thinking about it. You have to see it really clearly. You know, it works with lectures as well. It's much easier to understand if you sit in a lecture theatre than it is to watch the video of it or to read it in a book. Some things you can learn, but it just feels a bit different because it as a discourse.
You guys have always been so good at supporting kind of young bands and stuff, and I really appreciate that support throughout the years and stuff. Have you got like any key, like, if you think for young bands coming in, like, what's the thing that you think like makes make a band stand out, or like anything like you think that would be really good advice for a young band to have coming in to play their first show at the Cavern?
Well, we've probably got completely different views on this. I would say, like all art forms, it's just a way to communicate something. That's the medium you're using to communicate an idea. So the idea might be complicated, or it might be quite simple, but you need to be understand what you're trying to say, I think. You know, you could just do covers of other bands' music and kind of be proficient at playing them, but that wouldn't necessarily be your message. I think if you really want to stand out and move quickly from being, you know, sort of say for example a bedroom DJ or just a kind of college band into getting shows elsewhere, what's your message? What are you trying to say to people? And is this the best way to say it? You know, it's like I say a painting, you know, you see a painting or pick a photo, you're kind of moved by it or you're not. What you don't want is somebody to explain it to you. If the artist has got to explain it to you, then it's not working right. And also, I think with communication, if people, this is where we might differ, and I've always thought this, if people don't like what you're doing, you're wrong, not them, because you're trying to communicate something. And if you're good at communicating, you would understand what somebody's saying.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you like it.
No, but if they don't understand what you're trying to do, that means you're not clear enough, not them, because there's no such thing as a bad understander, there's only a bad communicator, so you just have to adjust what you're doing until people do get it and do like it. But like I said, that's my viewpoint.
No, I completely agree with that. That doesn't mean, but understanding, you can understand what someone's doing and still think it's shit. But I completely agree with you. I think one of the main, honestly, one of the best things that a band can do is, being in a good band is nothing to do, and there's lists and lists of people that you can think of where this applies. Being in a good band is nothing to do with how well the guitars are played, how good the vocals are, whether or not the singer did a vocal warm-up beforehand. You know, all these kind of things, there's nothing to do with it. Lots of the bands that have got massive and have been like hugely significant can't hardly play at all. They've got a singer who sounds mental or whatever, you know. What they've got, which is resonating with people, is that they're completely authentic and being themselves. And we get a lot of, and always have had, a lot of like local bands who come and they make the mistake of playing loads of covers. Don't play covers, we've already heard those songs, done miles better by the person who wrote them. There's no point in you doing them. I mean, fine, if you need to pad out a set because you've only got 3 songs and you want to do 4, fine, do something, you know. But it's essentially kind of pointless just learning how to play somebody else's songs. You want to write your own songs. It doesn't matter if they're rubbish, as long as, like Dave says, they mean something. Because if they mean something to you, that will come across to the audience. Even if they're a bit shonkily played and your amp's not very good and your drummer can't really drum, what comes through is you're being your authentic self, and that's easily identifiable by the audience. Which is why quite strange things like Sleaford mods can be really popular, because you just think, oh, what's this man going on about? You know, it's not. It doesn't sound like, it's not all beautiful like Radiohead or Adele or something like that. It's just this magic. But you know that what he's saying is something that's really real to him, even the bits that you don't really understand. So I would say that was one of the main things that local bands need to get out of the trap of doing, of just coming in, playing Mr. Brightside, and kind of posturing on stage. Just forget all of that and be you, because you've got a unique thing to offer which hasn't been heard before. We've heard Mr. Brightside thousands of times.
The other thing I would say would be like, we live in Exeter, and I've always considered, well, I guess all forms of music, but let's just take, for example, sort of independent alternative music as a combination of your urban environment clashing with a generation gap. That's what you need. That's the environment you need. Now, I would say this region has got certain kind of bands that have done really well. If you think about the bands that started here, like for example, Radiohead was, the singer of Radiohead was at Art College at the same time as me, and he was in a band. Muse kind of followed from Radiohead. They were influenced by them amongst other bands. I guess Idols have got Exeter connections.
Yeah, he's from Exeter.
You know, so what you, if you can kind of describe the environment you're from, it's a lot easier to kind of be authentic. I think if you're, for example, in an extreme thing, if you were trying to sing in an American accent about, you know, highway this or that, whatever's in America, I've never been there, but you know, it's not going to sound authentic. I know that's extreme and no one would really do that, but if you think of subgenres of, say, like I said, we had Africa Bambaataa down with like breaking beats was his invention, and you can see where he got that from. He's in an urban environment where you've got people shouting at each other, music playing out of a window, all these noises. He banged them together, cut them up, put them together, created breakbeat and hip hop. But British artists really created their own genres from that. you know, I would say drum and bass is English, isn't it? British. You know, so even though it comes from another source, you don't know where they got it from in the first place. You know, the punk rock scene we were into, it turns out, was super influenced by quite a minor UK band called Sham 69. They played in Washington, DC in, you know, 78 or something, or 80 or whatever it was, and these young kids who were really young just completely thought they're the biggest band ever, Sham 69. They weren't even popular amongst, you know, UK audience. There was obviously the Clash, Sex Pistols that were popular, but they took that sound and just, you know, did it in their own way and added the politics of Washington, DC into the mix, add something significant and authentic. They're a good model if you're ever interested in looking them up, Discord Records. They completely, Ian Mackay, the singer of Minor Threat, created the whole thing, only does DC bands, never sold to a major label. He could have easily sold his back catalogue, but he just wanted to do his thing independently, so it was never tarnished by, you know, corporate stuff. So you've got to respect that.
I never forgive myself that when Fugazi came and played, was it the Lemon Grove they did?
Twice.
Yeah, one of the times I had a bunch of mates going and it was my grand's birthday and I went to my grand's birthday instead. So, yeah, always gutted about that. Why did you guys start? Can you talk about Freak Scene? Like how you set up that? You set up a label, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, Freak Scene was our record label, which ran for about 10 years probably. We've never officially stopped it, we just stopped doing it. But it came out of a night, actually. I was putting on shows, punk rock shows every Thursday, and kind of alternative stuff, but mainly punk rock. And the night was called Freak Scene, which is named after a song by Dinosaur Jr., as I'm sure you all know. And it was like super popular night, and at that time there was like massive punk scene in the UK, and we were getting a lot of bands from America over as well, actually. That seems to have completely died a death, but at that point there was this absolute conveyor belt of like brilliant punk bands and ska punk bands and all this kind of. And because of that, and because I believe that this is how it happens, the local scene got really kind of buoyed, and people were really inspired to form like bands and then try and do them really well, and they're watching all this stuff from all over the world and like, oh, we could do this, you know. It was a really good kind of feeling. So we started putting out some records for the kind of better of the local bands. So we were just doing, I was going to say mainly singles, a couple of EPs. But yeah, some of the bands did all right and did some good tours. Tyler went on tour with 100 Reasons and Hell is for Heroes, and the Computers did well, and yeah, it was good. We actually put out quite a lot of records. Actually, we also did some records for bands from elsewhere, didn't we? Because we did Cars as Weapons, who are from Southend, and this band Spy vs Spy from the north. Yeah, that was a really good period. One of the interesting things about that period was that we were completely locked into this weird little geographical triangle with a place called Kingston and Cardiff. And these friends of ours in Kingston, and Southend actually, and these friends of ours from Kingston were managing a lot of bands and promoting bands. They were sending them here, we were sending Exeter bands there, and that linked in with Cardiff, and it was this kind of weird like triangle of bands like touring with each other, doing releases together. Everyone became like really good friends with each other, and yeah, that was a really, really good period, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you've got waves of genres and styles which and economics which make us win or lose at certain times as a venue. And I mean, obviously, people would know recently a lot of venues really struggled through being locked down for almost 18 months. You know, it was difficult, and I think that the current worry is to do with energy prices, but it creates opportunities as well, you know, especially for artists. If you know, there's always a way to do something. And I think what I was going to say was, I think ultimately it's all about collaboration. So for example, in this room, some people will be into like music production, some people may be into things like more academic sides of it, like writing, or, you know, publishing, you know, kind of doing artwork, for example. I think if you can collide these things together, it makes it much stronger, because people have got different sets of skills for somebody might really know how to make you look good with a camera, and if you're a DJ or a band, and you need that person, and it's worth kind of understanding that the more collaboration there is, the stronger it's going to be, because the idea of authenticity goes right the way through those things. If you want to open a recording studio, if you've got an authentic way of approaching it, it's the same thing, because again, people are buying it. You're a band, you're buying that studio. So if you think, this is great, this guy deals with this kind of way of doing it, and he's useful, you need to kind of hear that from other people. And so I think it can, if that's, everyone's got a role in sort of alternative and independent scenes, which is what we're part of. We're an independent venue that just operate from our own, we don't have any money. I mean, when we first started the Cavern, we didn't even have more than a 3-month lease on it. It was just, I didn't think I thought I'd go and get a job somewhere, when I was 20 or whatever it was, and just thought, this will be good for a laugh. We're in a band, we'll put on some shows, and then that'll be that. So it was just chancing it, really. And I think if there's a number of things that would make a venue work, I would say firstly it is the audience. You need an audience, so you're not doing anything yourself. You're both doing it. People are coming and supporting what you're doing. So it is ultimately always a collaboration. But the other thing is just carry on doing things, however bad it gets, however worried you kind of get about imaginary things. I think you've just got to get over it. I mean, we had a massive fire that burnt the whole place to a crisp in 2016, and I was looking it up on the internet, and it said most places don't reopen from a fire like that, and then that's something like 90% don't open, and the other 10% are quitting within the next 3 years from that date of reopening. But what are we going to do? That's one of the questions, especially for me. What am I going to do if I didn't do that? Because so you've just got to carry on, just find a way through it. However bad it gets, there's always a way through it. That probably goes for everything.
Me and Dave quite often refer to this, but one of the main reasons why we do the Cavern is so we don't have to get like a proper. We still manage to not get out of having a proper job, like a proper office job. I'm just wondering how far we can take this until we've, got away with it.
And you learn from mistakes. Obviously, if you're really young, things like business side of things. You might have the tax man crawling all over you because you just didn't do it right. You didn't have a proper approach to it, but you kind of learn. Again, you learn the hard way. Once you've suffered pain once, you avoid it the next time. But you could kind of go, I can't handle this. It makes me too anxious. I can't do it. But that would just be the end of it all straight away. You just got to think, who cares? Life is short and boring, and might as well just know that. It's relative as well, because if you're quite, if you're young, if you're 10. 5 years ago was half your life ago, you know what I mean? But as you get older, 5 years is nothing. So you kind of might as well. But it's not for everybody, though. Ian was asking earlier on, is it for everybody? Probably not, because it's quite risky. And you kind of sacrifice maybe. If you work for somebody else, you might be able to move up a kind of corporate ladder or something like this, and it might be really useful for certain kind of people to not have a certain kind of financial responsibility and get it offset with something else. But we just like doing things on our own. What
we really like, I think, is we're not accountable to anybody because we've got our own venue. If we decide we've got a gig on tonight, if we suddenly decided we didn't want to do it, we could just cancel it now and just, I'm going to Bristol tonight anyway, but we wouldn't do that, and we never have done that. But it's kind of a nice feeling that, you're not clocking in and clocking out, and everything we do is either our own choice or our own fault. So we haven't got someone breathing down our neck, apart from the landlord. The landlord, aside from him, no one's breathing down our neck, and we can kind of do whatever we like, and that feels really nice. So I'd much rather, even though it's way harder work, I'd much rather have our own venue than be working for someone else in a kind of corporate setting.
Well, one thing I think in all these things is also if you could be mildly adept at most of the kind of crucial aspects of what you're doing. So if push comes to shove, that you can survive it. say for example, again on a really mundane level, if you turn up at a venue and they haven't got the right, you know, decks, you think, well, I'll go and get mine then, you know. So it's always better to have a backup plan. And I think with business, it's the same thing. If you know bits about everything, obviously there are people who know better and you get them in. But if you could, you know, like for example, myself, I studied art, so I kind of learned. My first job was actually graphic design. I didn't know anything about graphic design, but neither did anybody else. It was at St Luke's School of Education, the part of Exeter Uni. I just had a call saying, do you know how to do desktop publishing, it was called at the time, and I just said, yeah, I didn't. But they didn't either. So I learned how to do design, which helped me. You know, once I learned the software, for example, I use Photoshop, partly because I used to do photography as well, but it's a kind of adequate design tool for things like flyers and posters. And you know, I'm glad I know how to do it, because before I really got confident with it, you'd have to go to a designer and pay them, and then they would play games with you and make it, oh, I don't know if I can do that today, and all this sort of thing. Same with website design. If you can just think, okay, mate, I'll do it myself then it's a lot safer.
By the way, Dave does any Cavern posters that you see in the venue all around town, Dave does all of those. And we were trying to work out how many he'd done in his lifetime once, so we were trying to work out that he's done about 350 a year for 32 years. So if anyone can work out how many, 10,000, is it? 10,000 posters.
Isn't there a Twitter account that someone does and it's got all the old posters on it?
Yeah.
Mark
Montague.
Actually, yeah, it's actually a website that he's got called No Crowd Surfing, and he's kind of got an archive of as many shows as he can remember. Honestly, it's so not complete. Yeah, I always find shows that, you know, because I've never been organised about cataloguing what we've done, and you know, you're just always on to the next thing. Like, I'm more worried about what we're doing tonight.
But you guys don't make a big deal out of the, like, you've had so many amazing names come and play in Exeter, and it's kind of like you don't make a massive deal of it. Like, you're always kind of like putting on the website, like, looking at it, it's like always focusing on the new bands.
Well, that's you've never got time to. I mean, every now and again we'll make a mention of like, oh, remember when this happened, you know, but very rarely, because you've always got the, you know, tsunami of future events coming at you that you've got to organise, you know. But also, we do agree on this. We never feel like we can kind of boast about like, oh, we've done the 1975, oh, we've done this, we've done the Amuse, well, we have done Amuse. But, you know, because it's their work, we're just providing the space for them to do it. We can't take any credit for how big those bands are. In a sense, we just got lucky. When you're promoting, you don't know if a band's going to end up massive or not. You know, we put on millions of bands that haven't done anything at all and been completely hopeless. And then you get the old few who end up being absolutely huge. But that's not down to us, that's down to them. We just happen to be in the kind of take the right phone call or answer the right email and make an event happen.
But giving the opportunity for people to go and see those bands, whether they make it or not, and for those bands, for those musicians and artists to play, and yeah, honestly, it's like something I think Exeter should be super grateful for, because so many venues have come and gone, and we wouldn't have had so many of these bands and these experiences. I wouldn't have had a load of great nights if it wasn't for you guys doing what you do. Guys, we've got about 5 minutes left, so are there any questions? Hopefully you've got some questions like this. So many interesting things that have been discussed today, and so many kind of different parts of the industry that we talk about and that we have, you know, as part of our lessons. But you're going to see very much like behind the scenes here. Are there any kind of there's no stupid questions? Anyone got any kind of random bits and pieces they want to ask David before they've got the opportunity? Go for it. Nice and loud, yeah.
So, like, if, for example, you wanted to put a gig in the Cavern, but your band is kind of like metal, and it's a bit off-genre for like what the Cavern is and all that, would you get referred to a different venue that's more suited to metal?
No, nothing's off-genre, even despite what we said earlier. But I mean, we'll give anything a go. What we might do is put you onto a metal promoter who's got a gig on at the Cavern and see if you can support get on the bottom of one of those bills. Awesome. But speak to us.
I mean, like, for example, the other day, the band called House of... Are they students at House of Cards?
Somebody mentioned them the other day. Who were we talking to? Is Albert here somewhere? Are you talking about House of Cards?
Got Gid here, which is a guitarist.
Yeah.
So for example, I had an email the other day from that band CVC. They're okay band, but you know, the email said, "Oh, can you organise a support for this show, local support?" And I spoke to somebody. I just looked on Facebook and just emailed somebody to see if House of Cards could do it. Ideally, it would have been useful to have like a music to send them or something like that, but I didn't. But I think it's fine. I spoke to the lady yesterday and just said, yeah, they haven't got any stuff, but they played the other day and they'll suit the band, so I think that one's okay. But
this is a live booking happening right
well, it was kind of useful to. I was fiddling around with the lights, I think, at the time, but I was kind of like thinking, yeah, this band sound really good. They, you know, not embarrassing, got some cool songs, and then when I listened to this CVC band, they sounded like, yeah, they'll fit well with them. So it was quite simple for me to just say, you know, I wouldn't want to book a metal band with them because they're not that genre. So it would be embarrassing if you know the person organising a tour and I put the wrong band and they say, well, why did you put them? And it's not the same thing at all. But I think, you know, House of Cards it would suit them. Do you know that? Do you listen to that band CVC or? Have a look at it. I mean, again, it's up to the band themselves. If they think, no, I don't really want to play with them, and for whatever reason, it's fine. But, you know, by playing, you do get, you know, instant feedback, you know, rather than, you know. So you might, what I'm saying is, if you're in a metal band, you might as well just say, let's get a couple of songs together. You only need 3 songs, really, to do a support slot. You don't need a full hour or anything like this, because you remember there are other bands playing, so you've actually got, you know, an hour and a half's worth of.
You've got to remember 2 things. There's other bands playing and nobody is interested in your band. So you just do a few songs that you think are all right and get off. And then hopefully some people are like, oh, that was good, you know, why don't you do more?
So how many bands a month do you have to source as support acts for?
Oh, loads.
Loads?
Yeah. I mean, there's like most bills are 3 or 4 bands.
So is it worth the bands keeping in touch with you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And, like sending, YouTube videos, or do you watch that, or what's the way for you to listen to them? What's the best way for you to listen?
Honestly, the best way to contact us is by coming in and speaking to us in person, because then at least we automatically know who it is we're dealing with.
This is the main message, isn't it? Be proactive.
Yeah, because we get loads and loads of emails every single day. And you kind of skim through, and some of them are super important, so you tend to focus on those. And then in amongst it, there's like, hi, we're a 4-piece band from Credited, and we play music in the vein of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You know, you're just like, yeah, you know what I mean. If we know you already, then we're like, oh, that lad who came in for the show, that girl who's in such and such, she came down and wants a show, I really want to help her because she was really nice, or whatever, you know. So at least we can put names to faces. Honestly, that's such a key point to it. Also, we just feel guilty saying no to people straight to their face. So if you just kind of catch us, you're just like, I've agreed to that now. That was annoying. But you know, so many gigs happen because of that. Someone catches you at a weak moment, and you, oh yeah, go on then. But,
it's amazing, like, you know, that's really exciting. You guys might be getting on a bill.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, go for it.
Another thing to emphasise, if you're starting out and you're writing your own stuff and things like that, look to support touring bands from elsewhere who are much better than you and much bigger than you. It's fine doing like bills just on your own and playing to your mates, but you're not really going to improve that much or learn that much. But if you start getting put on support slots with proper touring bands, honestly, it just puts you immediately into a completely different world. You kind of start to understand like what the level is. You learn a lot more how things are done actually in real life, on the UK circuit. And playing with bands who are better than you can actually learn a lot by watching what they're doing, how they're doing it, and all that kind of thing.
Can I add something to that? So I think it's quite an effective way to get one of the real payoffs of being an artist is to travel to other places. I mean, somebody was asking me the other day what you have to do to, you know, such and such a band were doing a load of dates in London, Bristol, around the place, and they thought it was something to do with the fact that they had this TikTok video and it got a lot of hits, and they said, it's because of that. I said, the singer has literally just spoken to all these bands and said, if you get me a gig in Bristol, I'll get you a gig in Exeter. And you know, that could be expanded out to, if, for example, before that economic collapse of 2006, we used to get a load of bands from like Japan and America, and a lot of it was, oh, we'll organise you a tour of Japan, we'll organise you a tour of Malaysia if you do us some dates in the UK, because they don't know anyone in the UK, but we do, so we could say, yeah, play at this place, and I think it's a kind of weird hidden payoff. That's just a direct route to get what you want. I mean, it's the same. It would be the same if all all the aspects of it, like production and things like that, is the same thing. If you, for example, if you want to do sound engineering for a band, probably the easiest way is if there's some of your peers who are doing music of any kind, say, I'm their engineer, is it all right if I do their sound? And maybe, if you kind of contact a venue beforehand, they might, and you say, look, I'm 17 years old or whatever, they may say, well, look, we'll stick our engineer with you just to show you. But that would be the kind of direct route to doing it. What I'm trying to say, I think, is that it's not easy to just apply for jobs and get them as that kind of thing, because people would be too scared that, who are you? Do you know what you're doing? But if you kind of have worked a lot with a band, for example, say, using a band as an example, you might be their sound engineer and on tour. These people see you around, like you may play a venue a couple of times doing this band sound, so they know who you are, and gradually it could expand outwards if you want it to.
That's such good advice. Guys, we're pretty much there with it. Any last kind of questions? Anything else? Tuscan? We'll go to Tuscan first, and we'll go over here. Okay. Last two questions.
I was just going to ask if there's anything that when you're looking at a band or an artist's social media, if there's anything that stands out to you to kind of set them aside from other bands.
To be honest, again, I reckon we totally disagree on this, but I do kind of go straight to a YouTube video these days and think, what do they look like? Because that way you can kind of get an idea of the genre. Then you could, when you're listening to the music, so it goes to what I was saying before. Then, if somebody's asking for a support, you can quickly see whether it would fit with them if you don't happen to know that artist. So, I would say, yeah, get a kind of cool video. I've been doing some videos for bands recently, actually, and you try and make it, make them identifiable if you're doing the video in a certain way. But really, I think that's what the video should be, just to show what you're about.
I'll tell you, one thing that always puts me off on bands on social media is when the bands who film their band practices and put them up. Like, why? I don't want to watch you practice. You want to see the end result, It's like someone's making you a cake. You don't want to watch them making it, you just want the cake, And loads of bands do this and show themselves, sounds awful, obviously, and looks embarrassing and stupid.
There probably is a way to come somewhere in between it. For example, if you know people are good at filming, you could take a live sound and just get them to cut a few things together.
Live shows, I think live shows can look quite good, or at least gives an impression. The other thing is, though, to be honest, you don't want to dupe people. You don't want people thinking that you're some massive band when you're not. If you're not going to bring any people to the show, if you're honest about that and say, we want to play, but no one's going to come, we'll put you with a bill with some bands who are going to have some people come, But the worst thing of all is when you think you're tricking us, oh, we're going to bring 100 people and no one turns up. You can ask, well, thanks for that. That was completely pointless waste of time, So it's best to be honest and say, I've only got 3 songs and no one's coming. We're fine. Sounds good.
I do think social media is important, and it's again. Pippa's managed bands, but I've never really been interested in managing a band. But if I wanted to help a band out and I know an agent, I would definitely I'd pick a couple of links off and send it to the agent and say, are you looking for support for so-and-so? I've got the band that have been asking. And so social media is great for that. But again, going back to the sort of idea of massive TikTok numbers and that, I mean, you could probably get that from just pouring a bucket of water over your head or something. So it doesn't necessarily translate into it being a really significant band or anything, does it? So I would be more into the Spotify world or Bandcamp or whatever, or YouTube.
You had a question over there, didn't you? Go for it.
So obviously a lot of club nights are over 18. Is it possibilities to run more 16 plus nights at your venue?
There would be if people who are under 18 weren't always trying to drink alcohol. But it's very difficult because that's all they want to do.
This is where one of your earlier questions, for example, the bomber on the key would definitely do 16 plus nights. Again, they're not allowed to sell alcohol, obviously, but they are interested in doing that. So if I was going to wanted to do a club night, I would either approach the Phoenix, because they've got kind of separate bar from the venue, so you could say, look, can we do this night? That's expensive to hire, and it costs you probably about 500 quid to hire, so you need to get, you know, plenty of people in. But the place, the Bomber, is the same size as the Cavern, so they'd probably be a lot cheaper, and you know, that's what I would do. Or, you know, I don't know. I think you know, if you want it in a venue with a PA and everything, yeah, they're probably the best places. Are you thinking about DJing on that?
Yeah, it's on the fence. Yeah.
It's really annoying problem, but it's too problematic for licensed premises.
Can you do an 18 plus night, or an 18, but people performing could be under 18?
Yeah, performers can be under 18.
Okay, so that was mentioned earlier by someone, I can't remember, in my class.
And we allow a certain amount of under 18s into a show. You know, if it was all 16-year-olds, we can't open a bar, definitely.
We can't do a club night with under 18s in, because obviously it's too hectic, everyone's everywhere, you don't know who it is. Gigs are quite different. For one thing, if one of you was coming down to watch, say, Frank Turner, and I said on the way in, you're not going to buy any drinks, you'd think, yeah, whatever, I don't care. I'm just here to watch Frank Turner, I don't care. So, and then the gig finishes and you leave, whereas club nights, obviously it's a completely different thing, you're in all different parts of the venue, you're there just to kind of have a general kind of good time rather than to watch a specific act, you know. So gigs are a really different mentality of people when they're at a gig than when they're at a club night, and people actually, well, a lot of people will happily not drink at a gig because they're just interested in, I've just literally come to see this man playing this guitar or this band, you know. The club nights are different, are too chaotic.
You do have to find a venue to do what you want to do if you're not 18. I don't know if you are 18 or not, but you know, if you're not, then, you know, I get it that you do want to start off getting some sets together, but they have actually been advertising under 18's nights there, and to training sessions for DJs to use their, basically run their beats through their PA, which is obviously going to be helpful. So I would approach them. Do you know the place I'm talking about?
It's Move, isn't it?
Move, yeah. That's it, Move, yeah. That guy Marcus, who runs that place, he would definitely be better than us at organising something like that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Awesome. So yeah, I find it really, really interesting, because I haven't had a chance to listen to Dave Clifford talk about this stuff before. But really, obviously we've had COVID, so some of you might not have been to the Cavern yet, like, go and watch a show, go and start seeing some gigs there. It's awesome fun, you'll see some amazing music, and then go and talk to them and try and get some shows, or try and get involved. You know, that's the way to do it, just like we're hearing. Give a round of applause, please, folks.